I press in between and I rockin' anything. Somewhere in a job, baby, somewhere in a job. Oh baby, oh, I can go nowhere now. I born from the love of sweet guys, oh baby, oh, I can go nowhere now. This thing is still rooted in my soul. I can't go nowhere now. I'm not leaving you again.
And welcome back. In commemoration of International Women's Day today, we are now joined by Assistant Director of the Gender Affairs Ministry, Mr. Amilcar Sanatan. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Marlon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. What's your message today from the ministry?
Most importantly, today, globally, we are celebrating International Women's Day, and the theme is Innovación y Tecnología para Igualdad de Género, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. And we're really trying to imagine a world where we could use technology for public innovation, technology to redress some of the gender inequalities that exist in our society. But more widely, we have women who are pioneers, we want to celebrate them, but we still want to put our attention to the worrisome harms that women experience in our society because of an unequal gender order.
Yeah, and how does technology, as it were, fills that gap?
Well, first thing, we have to look at the inequality. Around the world, around 69%, 67% of women do not have access to the internet, whereas when it's compared to men, we have 63%. Low-cost data plans, we have private sector initiatives that need to make sure we have that. But we need to raise awareness on new forms of gender-based violence, such as cyberbullying, cyber insecurity, revenge pornography, which is a problem of our time. And when we think of the work in the Office of the Prime Minister with Gender and Child Affairs, we need to continue to raise awareness on one hand, but empower civil society actors, as well as create champions in the private sector to promote the ending of gender-based violence in our society.
What are some of the problems that your ministry has been seeing as it relates to women in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, there are many problems that are development problems.
Yeah.
All development problems are gendered. This is not something our ministry is seeing. This is something every woman and man and every dem on the street they see. One of them, for example, would be sexual harassment against young women and girls when they go to work or school. You will have colleagues from Ministry of Labor who will speak today. That is a form of violence with them going into the workplace. That is not a form of decent work. When we think about development problems and the way we understand work and unpaid labor, domestic workers as well, who may not be regulated in a particular way, but they have rights guaranteed to them. Often these are women. And when we had a COVID-19 economic and social recovery, how do we protect the rights of the most vulnerable? These are the problems of our time, and all ministries are involved in this, whether it is increasing the number of women who participate in the leadership in the financial and energy sector, whether it is that we promote women, peace and security in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or in the Office of the Prime Minister, the social side of work, empowering women farmers who are involved with the fight against climate change, and we would always say engaging boys and men for gender equality, and of course the issue of mental health and well-being.
Yeah. And do you think that some of the problems that our women face in society, they are problems that would have come from time immemorial in Trinidad and Tobago, where women were seen as less than men, and you think that that is continuing today?
Well, I'm not here to be in the capacity of a historian for our society because I'm a public worker.
Yes.
However, there's a historical reality. The reason why you and I are here, the reason that I am even possible is because of an economic system that brought us to this side of the world. And part of colonialism was also a racist and a sexist gender order. It was a patriarchal one that used the bodies of women in particular for the reproduction of the plantation economy, that brought Indian women here as laborers in disproportionate ratios in terms of how they were working here and so on. But women were always involved with work as soon as they came. We didn't have the luxury to sit down and say we were at home. We didn't have an ideology that said women shouldn't work. You worked in slavery and you work in indentureship. And we live in a society where there are social values, but an economic order as well that says women must deserve less pay. And even when they get the job, they get less status in it. And we need to transform that. That is the responsibility of the state, and that is why the Office of the Prime Minister sees it as a priority. But we also see private sector entities as well as civil society as playing a fundamental role in making the changes in the workplace and on the ground, as we say.
And is your ministry prepared to lead that thrust for greater equality for the women of this country?
Of course we are prepared. Minister Ayanna Webster Roy right now is in New York at the United Nations representing Trinidad and Tobago at the Commission on the Status of Women 67. So we have the advocacy at the global level, we have the networks at the regional level, and we will continue to empower people on the ground to make robust changes to address gender inequalities. International Women's Day, yes, it is about the celebration of women, and we must pioneers. When you think of Audrey Jeffers, so many women in public service need to give credit to the figure that that woman is for radicalizing the public service to ensure that women have an equal place, including working class men, that they had dignity. But she promoted women in the civil service. But when we look at the work today, we need to transform gender inequalities which oppress women fundamentally, and we are very clear about that.
How does your ministry do that? What are the programs that you all have in place to support our women in Trinidad and Tobago?
If I may, there are a number of programs, but I would like to focus on one.
Yes.
It's gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming is fundamental because it means that we have a gendered evaluation, inputs, outputs, and monitoring and evaluation of all programs. Next week, we will be training on gender responsive budgeting. When we think about gender, how does it impact macroeconomic planning? When the Minister of Finance speaks about the national budget, how gendered it is, not just what projects exist for women and them, but when we think about stimulating the construction sector, how are we improving the lives of women workers there? So this is some of the work we do, and we have a focal point system that is coordinated by our coordinator on national policy on gender and development, where we ensure that each ministry has a focal point to represent the politics, the views, and the analysis of a gender worker in that ministry to ensure that we have some equity in the work that we do.
You know, sir, I think that when bad things happen to women in Trinidad and Tobago, there is sometimes a view that persons that are in power in Trinidad and Tobago do not really understand the concerns of women. And you have organizations in Trinidad and Tobago that continue to call for the upliftment of women, the protection of women, the support of women. And you get the perception from these organizations that their concerns are falling on deaf ears. What is the role of the Gender Affairs Ministry in this context?
We are always listening and ask about us from them. We have a relationship with civil society actors. But even though I sit in the seat as the Assistant Director for Gender Affairs in the Office of the Prime Minister, I'm also a citizen. I'm deeply concerned with the state of gender affairs in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, and around the world. When we see the unequal status given to women's cricket, that is a problem. Because if I have a daughter, I want her to have a fair shot and a fair pay for the work that she does. When we think about the work of public transport and the experiences many women take, especially who are involved with domestic labor, so they take public transport more during the day, then I have a serious issue for development. So nothing falls on deaf ears. We are people who are citizens who work in the ministry, and we will continue to do the work. Can we do more? Yes. And our main task, I would believe, in the Office of the Prime Minister is to ensure the intergovernmental approach, the all-of-government approach, takes form in it. It's difficult to work sometimes, but I have some youth and energy, and I have long hair, so people just listen to me when I walk on the road, if they didn't think I'm selling nuts.
When they think you're selling nuts?
Yeah, man.
That's a good one. But you, Mr. Sanatan, you, to me, you sit in a seat of power, if I can say that. And I think that you do understand the concerns of our women, folk in Trinidad and Tobago. But what is the problem when it comes to actioning what you are suggesting? Because I'm sure that women are viewing the program this morning and are saying, look, I'm very impressed by what Mr. Sanatan has said, you know. However, there has always been a problem of actioning the talk in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, I think sometimes we understand the limited capacity of some institutions to effect changes as quickly as they are. But we had made pioneering changes in Trinidad and Tobago, which would be like the Domestic Violence Act that we have done since the 90s. We ratified that. And now we have amended it recently to ensure that more vulnerable groups as well as expand the protections in it. We have the domestic violence registry. Before, we didn't have a children's authority. We have it now. Now we have the National Gender Policy, the Green Paper, which is a framework that could ensure that we have work across the board and that we have recourse. If you say something that is disrespectful to women and discriminates against women in the workplace, you have, it's not a worker issue an HR complaint, that is a form of gender discrimination in which the Equal Opportunity Act will take effect. So we have the mechanisms, that is our job as a state. But if I may, on the deeper question, and I really speak to people like this, is that the state is not the principal actor. We have that approach. We work with local government, we work with civil society, because we believe in co-creating development. The idea that we solve all the problems, no. It doesn't mean we wash our hands from it. But we believe in the capacity of people to drive changes in the society. We are coordinating mechanism within the state, but we work with people because they have the imperatives and they also have the solutions for success.
Yeah. One of the main issues that continues to plague our women in this country is the issue of crime. We would have seen it happen on the weekend. And you know, there's a view that some people have become numb to these violent incidents against women, and in a general sense that people have become numb, that the government and other organizations, and you would have spoken about the concerns and that you all are listening, but there's always the perception that more needs to be done to protect our women in Trinidad and Tobago. How does the Gender Affairs Ministry view these attacks on our women?
Crime is a complex phenomenon, but in fact it has become the single development priority of Caribbean states in the 21st century, how to deal with crime and violence and youth participation in it. Violence has become normative every day in our life, and as you said, people have become numb to it. It's quite complex, but I would say the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Division has an interesting submission, a number of things, border security, type of policing, social work interventions. Let's look at the issue of masculinity.
Yeah.
So men are the drivers of conflict against other men. Men are the drivers of conflict against women. And in terms of the rates of suicide, men disproportionately are the ones who commit it. So there's a triad of violence, that's a concept in gender studies that we could look at that says we need to empower men to see violence as not part of their social identity. That being a man doesn't have to hold up to the ideals of dominance and violence. And this social violence, yes, it is about economic opportunity. Yes, it is about socio-economic status and geography and proximity to gangs and so on and the allure, of course. But it is also about gender beliefs deeply rooted in our society, about dominance, the breadwinner ideology. A man must be a provider in all circumstances, which is a fiction. And at the Office of the Prime Minister, we're very conscious on that. So the new thrust to the public health approach to violence, we have some interesting submissions, as well as engendering crime and violence. We need to bring a gender analysis to it. And regrettably, I think many sectors in the society don't see gender as playing a role in transforming peace and security in our society. And we are here to push it, so I was happy to take the opportunity to articulate that to your viewers.
Yeah. Do you think that this violence that continues to be perpetrated against women, it is something that we have learned over the years and has been kind of passed on from generation to generation? I know you're not a historian.
No. But there are cycles of violence, and we have prevalent studies on gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago. We also have it from a health perspective. But again, it's complex. When people experience forms of violence, for example, domestic violence, if a woman experiences it, that's a cost to the state in terms of the healthcare. That impacts economic productivity. The HIV/AIDS coordinating committee in the Office of the Prime Minister is looking at the clinical interventions, the risk of STDs if a woman experiences sexual violence, what kind of support and care that they would have. But where it comes from is an animus against women, a subordination of the feminine, a repudiation of women, and the lack of acknowledgement of the dignity that every woman and girl carries in the society. If you believe a woman must succumb to a man, if you believe a woman is second to a man, then you are not participating in a society where we are truly equal. So gender equality is our goal. But in order to even begin to think about that, is to acknowledge the dignity of all people, women, men, girls, and boys. But where women are concerned, in an unfair gender order, historically, we as a state are trying to redress that. And of course, I give credit to all of the women pioneers, the activists, the Audrey Jeffords in the civil service, the Hazel Browns in activism, who made that vocabulary and action possible, which even created a role for me at this stage.
Yeah, and I think the credit to you, I think what you're saying this morning to the ladies who are viewing the program this morning, I think that they would be heartened by what you are saying, in that it would seem to me, and you have given us the perception, that the Ministry of Gender Affairs understands the concerns of the women folk in Trinidad and Tobago.
I may not understand as much as Bunji Garland right now, because the love affairs for him, you know, and the way he defended his wife. But I could take second place to Bunji, is okay.
Yeah.
But as I represent an institution, a man or woman, I have to represent these values, and I'll continue to promote them, and the next person who sits in my office will do the same.
Yeah. Well, we're just coming to the end of our interview, Mr. Sanatan. Anything else you'd like to tell us about some of the plans and programs that are in place for women from your ministry?
Yes, upcoming we'll have a virtual town hall on mental health and well-being. And we're going to look at these challenges that people endure and experience, and the psychosocial support that is available to them. And moving ahead, we really want to listen to people more. We want to listen and promote the concept of gender equality in all spheres of the society. And my director, Michelle Ann Hart, who is also in New York, supporting the work of the Minister, Anna Webster-Roy. We will work together as a team collectively with the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Division. And we're looking to make things interesting. Carnival are done for us. This carnival for us right now.
The work now start, eh?
Done now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amilcar Sanatan, Assistant Director at the Gender Affairs Ministry. When you see the gentleman, address him in that way. He is not no nuts man, eh? Right? Respect.
Many thanks.
Thank you. All right, so it's time to take a break, but let's check out this traffic update from on the Beetham Highway.
No, we going outside and earning we own shilling. Ladies, what's we woman? Have changed the course without remorse. What? Woman is boss.